Thanks, Shannon.
I want to start with this because so much of this conversation, as Ashley was just reporting on, has to do with U.S. energy policy. The Wall Street Journal editorial board tonight saying this: Mr. Biden hasn't had an onshore lease sale and is the only president in at least 2 decades not to have done so in a given year. Approvals for new liquefied natural gas terminals and expansions are also sitting at the Department of Energy and Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Now, you've heard the administration say, listen, doing things like restarting the Keystone Pipeline or doing some of these other things, they're not going to give us immediate relief. But should we be looking to the next disaster like this war?
Well, there are some things, Shannon, they could do immediately. They not only shut down the Keystone Pipeline, and that's correct. Getting that thing started back up is going to take a long time. But there are other pipelines in our country that they've forced the flow to be reduced. They could easily, allow those pipelines to flow at maximum capacity. We could also purchase oil from other countries, because there are a lot of manufacturers out there, a lot of producers of oil. We don't have to get them from Russia. $55 million a day of American hard currency are going directly to Vladimir Putin's Russia, while they are indiscriminately bombing civilian targets. I mean, he's committing war crimes. So you could say American dollars, by Biden administration's decisions, are funding Vladimir Putin's war crimes. And that should not happen. That's why I've got a letter to him demanding he stop, and we'll be filing a resolution next week that all oil sales be stopped to the United States from Russia.
Not often you and Speaker Pelosi are on the exact same page. Sounds like you might be now.
Yeah, I know. Shocker.
I mean, listen, I think
yeah, she said that the other day.
Yeah, they want to see bipartisan agreement when it comes to doing what we can. We have limits to what we can do with regard to helping the Ukrainian people, but there is a feeling of helplessness, and you've been a combat surgeon. I mean, you know what these people are experiencing. Some of the videos and the pictures are incredibly important that the world see what's happening, but it's also absolutely heartbreaking.
Well, there's no doubt about it, Shannon. There are a couple of things that we can draw, conclusions we can draw from this conflict. And very clearly, the indiscriminate harming of civilians and children and bombing, that's a sign that perhaps Russia is in a worse place than they thought they should have been by this timeline. He's backed in a corner. He can't seem to win this fight, and so he's going to try to break the will of the people. And so that's a sign that he's sort of in the corner, and what we have to ask ourselves is, what else is he willing to do? Bombing a nuclear plant being one of those things. So clearly, I think, this is tragic. And that means we should do everything we can do, and we can certainly stop buying oil from Russia. And our sanctions, I mean, the president allowed oil transactions as exceptions. So while there are sanctions on these banks, they can still do oil deals. That makes no sense to me. We should shut down their oil economy, crush the ruble, and perhaps, this causes Putin to back down.
I want to put up on the screen a look at Russia's nuclear weapons arsenal. There are thousands and thousands of things that they have at their disposal. Total inventory, nearly 6,000 different pieces that they've got there. Listen, Ukraine, back in '94, as part of the Budapest Memorandum, gave up their nukes with the reassurance from the West, from Russia, that its sovereignty, its territorial integrity would be respected. And yet, Mr. Putin has those nukes, and everybody knows it, and Ukraine is without any. How do we get to this situation where Russia's clearly violated this memorandum and many others that they've had? How do we treat them by the rules that we want them to play by, but certainly they aren't?
Yeah, they're certainly not playing by the rules, and that's why the UN and other governing agencies have said they're going to investigate war crimes. They're going to put people on trial. Those generals that work for Vladimir Putin will be before a tribunal someday, and they need to know that. So this is just the start of what's happening from the world, from the West. And I am convinced there will be criminal trials held against both his generals and maybe someday Vladimir Putin if he survives this.
At the same time, there are ongoing negotiations with regard to an Iran nuke deal. Russia's at the table for those conversations. How in the world do we talk about isolating them from the world community when they're at the table with those discussions on a very critical issue to the entire world? And this idea of Iran potentially having nukes, that is going to keep a lot of people up at night as well. Now, we're told that this deal may keep those under control, but we have a lot of reason to be skeptical about what the Iranians are saying publicly.
Yeah, you can't trust the Iranians any more than you can trust the Russians, whom somehow the President of the United States thinks is an able negotiator for us in this JCPOA deal. Look, we shouldn't be at the table with the Iranians, let alone having the Russians there as a part of the negotiation. So, you know, I remember Robert Gates' quote about Joe Biden. He's never gotten a single foreign policy issue correct in all his years in government. And this is a guy who served both President Obama and President Bush as Secretary of Defense. Biden is still batting zero. He's getting everything wrong, whether it's the JCPOA, trying to restart that, how he's handled, you know, Afghanistan, and now this debacle in Ukraine. We passed stingers to be sent to the Ukrainians back in November. They only got to the Ukrainians a week ago. That was because of Joe Biden.
Well, we hope now that he will continue to be a voice trying to lead our allies, NATO, the Europeans as well, whatever it takes to benefit the Ukrainian people in their hour of utmost
Whatever
need.
it takes.
Congressman, thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon.